What's up, fellas? Alright, technical issues today has been rampant. How are you guys doing? Long time no see. Sorry for the hiatus on the last couple of weeks. Got a little bit of a hiccup. Please let me know if the music's too loud. Probably is. Let me turn it down a little bit. Yeah, is it too loud? Is it okay? Alright, what about now? Is this cool? Is this okay? Let me know if the mic volume's too loud. Is it? Okay. That is weird. Let me check something here. What about now? Is this okay? There we go. Not really sure. Yeah, okay, cool. So how you guys been doing? All right. Today I thought we would do something a little bit different. Besides just, you know, doing our regular sculpting, meditative and boring sculpted rocks, basically, because that's a big thing on this little project we've been doing. We're gonna do trim sheets. At least I'm gonna run you through my process of doing trim sheets and tileable textures in ZBrush. I usually do all my trim sheets in ZBrush unless it's like something like super specific that you might want some iteration and art direction capabilities. That I usually use something a little bit more procedural like Substance Designer. But most of my trim sheets, I would say all of the trim sheets that you see on my personal projects are done inside of ZBrush. So this is usually how I start off. I did a little prepping for this stream. This is basically a ray mesh, just doing one and then duplicating it over and using a plane there to keep the wrap mode on. So let me just start off by bringing in a clean project, and then we're going to continue on this one just to showcase what I mean. So this is our polyplane 3D. It comes with ZBrush, and what I usually do is I duplicate this over and then split this into its own separate subtool, and then I use the gizmo primitives. I don't use those regular pleb primitives anymore, you know. Okay, so a trim sheet is usually like a tileable texture that only tiles from side to side or from up and down. It doesn't really matter. It tiles from one direction. So you use that, for example, to texture architectural trims. That's why it's called a trim sheet, because it's usually what it's used in games, and not just games actually. It's used in film as well, but at a much higher. It's used as a displacement map in film, but mostly it's used in games, and it's used to texture the let's say the sides of like an arch, or maybe the columns and the skirts on walls and stuff like that. And if you have just a single texture, it is beneficial. So you have like multiple patterns here, like you have here, let's say. So yeah, so you have like your multiple patterns that are going to be scattered around the architecture, right? And you can have a single model with different sections of the very basic like low poly model UV'd on different parts of the trim sheet, and that's going to texture an entire model with different patterns using a single texture, right? So that's the whole point of a trim sheet. Basically, you have like something like this going like around an arch, or maybe something like this section on like an inset on a piece of architectural detail, and maybe something like this on like a skirt or whatever on the architectural piece. Yeah. So yeah, on a very simple level, a trim sheet is nothing more than a tileable texture, but it just tiles on one direction, right? And then we can use this, and this is something I wanted to show you guys. Let's see if we have time today, but we can use this and bake this in something like Substance Painter and bake a height map, and then bring those height maps into ZBrush to displace geometry, to make the low poly, let's say, much more closer. Let's say the detail is actual geometry and not just like a normal map on a flat plane, you know? So that's usually what you would do for something like Nanite, because Nanite, well, Unreal Engine doesn't support displacement anymore, like dynamic displacement. Well, now it does with 5.3. It just released, and it creates a whole set of workarounds this issue. But yeah. Right, so let's go over this. And going back to this, what I usually do is I have this reference plane. This is going to be the plane that's going to be there until the end of the process, and sometimes I even use it to bake. At the end of the day, you want to bake this into like a plane because you want a texture, right? A square texture. Trim sheets don't necessarily need to be square. They can be like a rectangular shape if you have more trims. But in terms of like game workflows, you want to keep the width resolution. If you make a rectangular shape that's taller, you want to reduce the width because it's the amount of pixels being calculated that matters, right? So, and then I go over here and I try to use shift here to break this, let's say, to make this sort of snap to a corner or something. And I try to use these workflows for trim sheets because it's just non-destructive, and I'm trying to tweak the design and sometimes even the shape, the overall sculpt, as much as I can, and be as less destructive as I can. So if I go now and turn on, let me do the manual way instead of using hotkeys because I want to show you guys. So if you go over here to array mesh and you turn it on, and it just spawn, let's say like 4 repetitions, and then you offset it by 4. You can't see it now because it's a flat cube, right? But if you press like, let's say, dynamic subdivision, you can see it's perfectly. I'm gonna crease this. Sorry, crease all, and lower the crease and smooth, and you can see what's happening right now, right? So there's still a couple more that can fit in there, so I just go over by eye, just do 6 repeats and go over to the X and do 6 amount. And this is not a perfect kind of square, so we're gonna have to do some eyeballing here. But again, at the end of the day, what you want to do is you have that flexibility to add to that. So if I wanted to go over and do something like this, then I might need to tweak that. But let's just change this one. So I'm gonna do some cool masking over here. Split this in mask point and switch this to, let's say, yeah, so the regular cube, this is another issue here. So if you go to the regular cube, let me just make Polymesh 3D. Actually, before I do Polymesh 3D, if you use the initialized cube, like this one, right? Not this one, sorry. This isn't cube. Jesus, had too much coffee, sorry. So this cube that comes with ZBrush that you use to make Polymesh 3D, and then you have the initialize button. You have all these options here that allow you to change like the spawn width and the size and etc. Maybe the sides count, and you can make this like a cylinder. The problem with this is that it has a pole right there, right? And I don't really like that because once you subdivide this, that's going to give you some weird stretching. And usually a regular cube, let's say, from software like Maya or Cinema 4D, they don't have poles, right? So what I usually, instead of doing this and then doing make polymesh 3D and whatever, what I usually do is I switch this over. I go to the gizmo, I press this gear icon over here, and there's like a couple of primitives here. And they still give you some tools, let's say, to tweak the mesh. So if I go to Polycube, you can see it has no poles, and I can still raise the subdivisions from each side without it having a pole. So this is actually perfect for sculpting. So if I want to have like 4 by 4, I need to fix my tablet. Jesus, my sensibility is all over the place. So something like this. No, this is 3. Something like this, right? This is already perfectly even, has no poles, and you can already start sculpting. So if I go over here and just divide this up and I start sculpting, it's even everywhere, right? Whereas if I use this cube, if I use this regular, where's the cube? Jesus. Cube 3D. Yeah, so if I use this cube, make polymesh 3D, and then start dividing it, well, first of all, there's this stretch right over there. So if I crease this, even though if you want to do some more of a flat subdivision kind of thing, so if I do a crease, go over here and do dynamic and crease, and then lower this, and then just apply this, right? Apply my dynamic. It's the same thing as dividing. You can see what's happening right there, right? You're getting this circular weird shape, right? And if I start sculpting on this, well, you can't really tell right now, but there's some obvious weird aliasing kind of stretching happening on the pole, right? It's no big deal if you're going for Dynamesh, because you can just, you know, turn on Dynamesh. Oops. I have to delete my subdivisions first. Let me just delete lower, delete higher, and then just Dynamesh. If you Dynamesh, doesn't really matter, because Dynamesh is, you know, it's a projection anyway. So you can still go over and sculpt however you like, but I just prefer to use the gizmo. And I also use the gizmo for a whole bunch of other things that you're gonna see in the future. Maybe not in this stream, but definitely in the future. So let me just delete these tools over here. Yeah, so if I go over here and then just switch this, let's say, I'll just grab, I'll do a cube again, but this time I wanna move it somewhere around there, and then I want to move it perfectly to the side, right? And then let's just do the array mesh before we do anything else. So array mesh, let's do like 10 just to be sure, and 10. And there we go. Let me just push this back a little bit, and you can see they're not perfectly even. That's because this plane is also not perfectly even. So because it's a, let me just push a plane over there. So I try to prepare my texture like a plane. So that plane is actually going to be my texture. At the end of the day, what we might want to do here is that you're going to use wrap mode anyway at the end. So in this case, I'm gonna, if I scale this down, you can see everything is just scaled. So I want to lock size, and if I lock size, I scale it. It's locking the position of the array based on, so it's the scale is basically not affecting the size of the scale of the instances, right? So I want to do maybe like 0.75 or something, and then just push this there. Let me just crease this. I like to work on creased mode. And now I want to do maybe like 8 by 8. Ah, here's the problem because of the lock size, right? So let me just reset this whole thing. Lock position. So I can move it freely. And this isn't supposed to be 31. It's like 10 by 10. And there we go. And now we can start scaling this up just a tad, because I actually want this to be like a rectangular shape. So I'm going to scale it to a double size. Trying to match this right over here. And you can see it still doesn't match perfectly. So what I can do is actually put my gizmo there by pressing Alt and tapping. And then just scaling this up ever so slightly. We can make this uneven anyway. So it's sort of matching. And then we can tweak that. So let's do, how many of those are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So it's 5 by 5. And there we go. And this is perfectly aligned. But the other one isn't. And what we can do, if this cube, of course, I had to screw up. So this cube has, if it has no divisions here, like on its side, no divisions. What I usually do is I clip this off to the perfect to match that, basically, right? So I'm gonna clip this a little bit. Let me just go to clip, to our clip curve brush, and just clip it ever so slightly. That's too much. Just do a little bit like that. There we go. Yeah, and then we can match that up with another mesh, right? All right, so then let's say we want to add something like this. Let's go polycube. I don't want any divisions when I start off. And I want to make this, whoops, because the lock size isn't turned on. So let me split this on first. Go over here. Scale this down. Whoops. Just first match this up. And I want to scale it there. On that corner, right? Let's scale it down to like 0.5 and then rotate it around like so. Reset our pivot. I'm gonna make something like that. And now I can test out how many of these fit. It's usually what I do. And let's try 12. More. It's like maybe 20. No, like 15 maybe. If it's over the texture, it doesn't really matter. Because at the end of the day, we're going to have to tweak it. Something like similar. That's also why I do these with a little bit of a gap, so we don't get that artifacting at the end of the texture, right? So if I do something maybe a little wider like that, that's gonna be probably fine, right? So you're gonna have this little trim here and then some architectural pieces, and you can also just cancel the save because that takes forever. We're gonna do some architectural pieces. If you look at our other trim, no, this isn't a trim, but this other trim. Where's the? Jesus, I don't name anything. Like Paul would kill me if he saw me this. Okay, so if you look at other trims, this is basically just a Z modeler mesh. I model with Z modeler and then just use array mesh to make it tile, let's say. So it kind of fits here, And the thing I did was basically I did an array. And the array is basically 4 repeats for X amount. And that's it. And it tiles. And the thing is, since the part where it intersects, it doesn't have that gap there, we can use wrap mode to actually sculpt this off. So let me exemplify what I mean. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with wrap mode. Let me just take a sip of my little coffee cup. If any of you guys that are watching are from Escape Studios, you know this little ritual that I have with a little cup of coffee, right? Nope, not Brazilian, so Portuguese. Close though. We speak Portuguese, so yeah. Portuguese. So basically what I was saying, if I basically make mesh here, this is now actual geometry. And here's the cool thing. Just do auto groups. Whoops. Go over here, do a little bit of an auto group. Oh, right. If I made mesh that are that close, it's actually going to extrude the whole thing. So I don't want that. No extrude, make mesh, and now they're separate mesh. So if you do extrude and they sort of clip, it's gonna basically merge all those polys, which we don't want, right? We want that little bit of a gap there, which we can then run in auto groups, and then we can maybe tweak this a little bit. Whoops, this was actually. And let me just center the pivot here. Move this a little bit over there. And let me try this one. Just give it a little bit more of a gap. Make it more irregular, let's say, between these gaps. We can also just, after we divide this, just sculpt away. So what I mean by the wrap mode is that we can, let me just try it with a DEM standard so you guys can see what I mean. Well, I'm not going to use this because otherwise you wouldn't be able to tell. So now it's stroke, I'm sorry. If you go to brush and you go to curve, exactly, there's a wrap mode button. And this basically tiles your strokes from one side to the other, top to bottom. Hello, Kumori Grass. How are you doing? Yeah, well, é parecido, cara. Brasileiro e português é uma coisa, falamos todos a mesma língua. Sorry, a little bit of a Portuguese over there. Yeah, we're basically the same thing. We speak the same language, so it's fine. Hello. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that name, man. It's different characters and all that. I'm afraid I'll butcher it. So, but hey, how are you doing? All right. So if I start applying let me just apply the dynamic subdivision so you guys can see what I mean. So if I apply this, it's like 1 million polygons, and let's just start smoothing out these. Whoops. Just smooth out these transitions over here. So I could get a little bit of more of an uneven kind of surface over there. And then let's go back to our highest subdivision. Let's uncrease everything. I don't need the crease anymore. And now what we want to do is on the DEM standard, on the brush, well, remember it's brush, curve, wrap mode. If I turn it to 1, it's going to be doing that side to side once, right? So actually let me exemplify that on a plane. So if I go over here and I bring in like a plane 3D, and let's just make polymesh 3D. Let's do some flat subdivisions over here. Let's go to geometry, turn off smooth, and divide. Maybe to like 1 million. That's fine. And our DEM standard has wrap mode to 1. So if I start sculpting and go off to the side, it's going to carry on that side. This is perfect for tileable texture creation. Same thing goes from top to bottom. So if I start, whoops, if I do stuff like this, I can actually start sculpting like some strokes, whatever, you know, just to toy around and show you what I mean. So I can sculpt in infinity, right? And I'm sculpting, it's always tileable, so let's test that out. If I turn on array mesh, and this, I use this a lot just to test out the tiling. So I go for maybe 2, in this case 2, and offset this by 2. Well, it's not perfect, but you know what I mean. So let me just lock position, lock size, and put this at 2. I should have done this before the sculpt. Let me go back to where I was in the beginning. Yeah, something like this. And let me do the array mesh. Lock position, lock size. Let me do 2 by 2. Right, and now let me append a new stage, and the same thing, it's 2 but on the Y. So now you get, okay, it's not 2 anymore, sorry, it's 4. It's twice the amount for some reason. Alright, so there it is. So there's like my test for tileable texture. So if I now start sculpt, right, it's the lock size you need to worry yourselves about. You can see it's perfectly tileable. Right? So I'm gonna link that up. Let me just share if you guys want to see a little bit more on that. There's my art station. I'm gonna link that up on chat. There we go. On art station, I have like a few environments there. Also have like props and all that. But if you want to see like full breakdowns of environment art using ZBrush, Unreal, Substance, a whole bunch of different workflows. There's, if you look at the environment art pieces, there's like a fully detailed breakdown of the process. So yeah. So the idea of having wrap mode on is that now we can go over to our trims and we can start sculpting without worrying if it's going to be tileable or not. So if I go over with the dam standard and I start doing this, you can see it's doing it on the other side. So wherever that plane is doesn't really matter, it's already tileable, right? So you just want to make sure that there's no that this section on the edge of the texture is not meeting like an empty part like this one or this one. In this case, it doesn't really matter because it's going to be like a pattern detail, so it's okay. Here it's also fine because it's set in the middle, precisely in the middle. And here it's just a straight thing where we can sculpt. I'm actually going to showcase this over here. So let me apply the subdivisions, uncrease all, and let's just do one more division probably. And let me use trim dynamic so you guys can see. So the end of the texture is right over there. So the end of our, let's say, regular wrap mode tiling. And let me turn on wrap mode to 1. And if I start trimming, you can see it's happening on the other side. So this is usually what I do. Is I turn on wrap mode and I start sculpting, isolate this. And this is going to be immediately tileable. This is actually not the pattern that I want, so I'm going to do a little bit of a mallet fast over here. Oh, the mallet fast needs to have this turned on. So this is a per brush setting, so you want to turn it on your brushes. If you use this all the time, just turn it on regardless. Turn it on for every brush, right? There we go. So if I do this, doing it on the other side, as you can see, this is too much noise. You don't want that much of of contrast. Like when you're doing like trim sheets, it's gonna be repeated everywhere. You have to keep that in mind. So let me just run an H polish on this. I'm just trying to polish a little bit of those sections. To make this tileable. Try it again over here. So I don't know if you guys watched any of the other streams that I did, and if you did, you probably know that I use the orb brushes a lot, especially for this kind of work. In this case, I'm just gonna go in and do a little bit of cheating here. I'm gonna use surface noise. It's not cheating, actually. Thank you, Noribite. You mean this little thing that I'm doing? This is just a cube, but thank you. So, going over here and doing a little bit of surface noise. Let me just up the strength a little bit, turn up the noise scale. I'm gonna make this with some faults here and there. Something like this, maybe do a negative one. And I'm gonna do some searching over here. Oops. And I think I had a few of those here. Nope. Textures. Nope. This is the rock ARM. Let me see where I have those. I have a few textures. I had a few textures prepared for this. Let me see. I totally forgot to put them on the folder. So go over here. They're basically Megascans textures. So you can get the Megascans textures and then just tweak them inside a ZBrush to use them in surface noise. So surfaces, rock smooth. Is this the one? No, it's not this one. Rock rough. Yeah, something like this kind of works, I guess. Doesn't really matter though. So you get something like this, right? Like a displacement map from Megascans. And then you use that. So basically we want to do, let me just copy this. There it is. I want to use the EXR, right? Quality. And the alpha scale. Let me just get the strength up. Let me turn mix basic noise off just for now. And you can see what it's doing. It's using that to displace the mesh. But the scale is just too much. So another thing is we could use UVs, but in this case it doesn't really make much of a difference because we're only going to see it from the front. To wrap what parts are okay to go over the initial plane edge and what is not. All right. So, what you mean why tiling wise? Like if it's if it tiles properly, if you have wrap mode on, it doesn't really matter. So if you want to make this like a perfect, you know, perfect cubes and whatever to fit nicely into the trim sheet, then that's fine. You can do that, but you can also do what I did over here, for example, in this section here. Let me just turn this on. So if I go over here, this is irrelevant because I'm still going to sculpt on top of this, right? So, and when I sculpt on top of this, it doesn't matter if it's going over that initial plane, right? Unless I don't have wrap mode turned on. You have to have wrap mode turned on, right? So in this case, the surface noise kind of helps, but I'm still gonna have to sculpt on top of it. Otherwise, it's not gonna tile properly. right? Because surface noise doesn't, well, it does, but it projects on the front, and you need a perfectly matched texture, and that's just too much work for the result you want, because you only want the surface noise to do part of the job for you. You don't want to rely too much on the surface noise. So you want to do yeah, something like this. Let me reset this so I can see what's going on over here. If I do this at 1, this is the scale of the texture, right? So it should be maybe alpha scale of 2, right? Or maybe 0.5, actually. It's the other way around. Yeah, something like this. So it tiles 2 times on a model. And you can see there a repeating pattern. And now we can actually mix some basic noise, and the basic noise could be like 2 maybe, or maybe 128, because I like power of 2 numbers. And if we mix the basic noise, we can do like a multiply. It's going to multiply on top. You think of this as like Photoshop layers, right? But it needs UV to properly... No, not necessarily. You have that option over here, but you can see it's grayed out because I don't have UVs on this mesh. But you don't necessarily need UVs to project surface noise. No. Well, surface noise, it wraps around perfectly if you have UVs, right? If you don't have UVs, it's just projecting. So on the side here, it's going to stretch, right? Because it's being projected from the front in this case. So if I mix the basic noise, if I don't mix, you can see that it's stretching on this side. But in this case, since it's a rock texture, it doesn't really... It's not that noticeable. And you're not going to notice, because at the end of the day, we want to make a texture. It's going to be baked from the front. So all that matters is the detail that's on the front, right? So this is the theory, right? This is all that matters. This is what we'll see in the texture. So something like this, right? This is going to be our normal map. So we can texture the entire architectural details on top of that. So yeah, so if we had like some basic surface noise here, and we can see that there's where it ends, there's where it starts. Doesn't match up properly, but doesn't matter. So let me just use layers just to be sure. So I'm gonna add another layer. It's recording, so now I apply this to mesh, and I can start sculpting on another layer. So I'm gonna use my H polish. I have the hotkey over here for wrap mode, and I could start polishing up this surface. And let me try to do some flattening here and there. And we can also do some using these brushes here. We can even use some brushes from XMD. I don't know if you guys use XMD, the XMD toolbox, but I got it from one of the Sculptoffs for the ZBrush Summit a couple of years ago. And I use it all the time nowadays. I just use the damage kits. So I'm gonna get something like this. And you can see this damage kit just does this, right? So I'm gonna use this, but then I'm gonna turn on wrap mode. So this wrap mode is it can be used on any brush. I had no idea wrap mode existed. Yeah, like ZBrush has a lot of like hidden features that a lot of people just, because a lot of people just use ZBrush to sculpt and Dynamesh. That's the majority of what people use it for, which is fine if that's all you need, right? But there's a whole bunch of different features here that could be really useful. So you can see what's happening if I turn on wrap mode with this little brush over here. And I usually work in layers for the trims because it's non-destructive. So let's say I'm doing this, and I actually use layers and morph targets. So let me set up a morph target over here. So I'm going to go to morph target. And nowadays, you don't even need to store a morph target. You can just press Control and click on your undo. And the morph brush, by definition, knows that that little history tab over there is like your morph target. So you don't even need to store a morph target if all you're using it for is for like erasing details, right? So let's say if I have that tapped on, I'm gonna get the brush again, and this already has rep mode on. So, and let's say I do this, right? And I'm like, this has too much of like a granular look to it. I don't really like that. So I can just go over to the morph brush, and I'm using layers. So it's 2 levels of non-destructiveness, right? So if you go over here to the morph brush, this is what's happening. It's erasing that detail, right? And maybe I want to erase it up until the section where there's some like cracks or something. Maybe I just want those cracks over there. And maybe I don't want that much. Or, nah, this doesn't work that properly, but you get what I mean, right? And not only am I using morph target, the morph brush, to erase the details. Oh, I had to have wrap mode. You see what happens if you don't have wrap mode turned on? It's not going to happen there. That's a big problem for tileableness, for tiling, right? So you want to do this, and then you want your morph brush to have wrap mode on. And this is what's going to happen. You're morphing on one side and the other, perfectly tileable. So let's do something like this. Right, just to morph it out. And at the end, what I usually do is I apply just a couple of layers with very high frequency details, very high frequency noise patterns. But that is usually what I do for realistic environments. This is like my first stylized environment in a while, like personal project wise. And so I'm not really sure how I would use that workflow for this. Next environment we'll do is definitely going to be more realistic. So maybe something like dark fantasy or whatever. So you can see what's happening on the side and the back. It doesn't really matter to me because this is all we care for. Is this view over here from this angle, right? And this is going to tile perfectly from one side to the other. In this case, it's even going outside of the border. There we go. So let's go over here to the orb clay. It's not doing the rep mode is not being applied properly for some reason. Let me just go back a little bit. So if I do, let me do transparency on so I see where the tileable section should be happening. There we go. We have a problem here. We have an offset problem with our wrap mode. So if I do this, this should be happening over there. That means our plane is not at the correct size. So let me just do a little bit of a cheat here. If I go over to our other thing, this is probably working. So let me just apply this. And let me see, wrap mode on to 1. This is already applied. Applied divisions. Yeah, this is correct. This is because the plane here, the plane that's being used to gauge the wrap mode is not perfect in a sense related to the scale, right? So let me try something here. We're learning, guys. We're learning. Let me try something over here in deformation. Where's deformation? There it is. Let me unify this whole thing. Whoops. Unify all. Where's the unify all? So if I repeat to active, repeat to other. This is gonna unify. It's not what I want. That's the problem with the plane. Let me try to bring in just a regular plane just to see what happens. Where's the subtool? And insert plane 3D. This is what wrap mode is looking at, right? This is the scale, let's say. So if I go to this plane over here and I start dividing well, I have to go over here because I forgot to put the smooth button. So if I start dividing this and delete lower, and now I use the damn standard. Whoops. I have to have ghost on. Yeah, you can see it's working. Because this is the scale that ZBrush is looking at, right? So let me delete this one. Actually, delete lower. I'm gonna use this. Okay, and now let's go over to the wrap plane. If we go over to the size, let's try it again. Let's try it on this plane, actually. Oh, Jesus, I need to add that button to the... Divide a couple of times. You see what's happening? There it is. So if I move this to the world, it's in the center of the world, but for some reason it's giving me this. It should be offset. So if I should be using Scale Master maybe, or I can just tweak my trim sheet to that other plane basically. So let me turn this off and look at the plane. There it is. And I'm gonna push this to the front over here. Yeah, it's not the plane that's influencing wrap mode. It's that when I bring in a regular plane, I can see what wrap mode is looking at. Because wrap mode is looking at the world units, let's say. It's looking at your document size relative to the document, right? So this plane is actually what is a representation of what wrap mode is looking at, right? Alright. Como os caras parecem saber que estão todos escrevinhos de software. Well, I don't know every little secret on the software, right? So Bruno Pereira asked, how come there are people that know all the little secrets of this software? And no, I don't know every little secret of ZBrush. I just know a little bit of... I have drank from the fountain of Paul Gabry. So I know a little bit of all of these little tricks because I did a workshop. Not a workshop, it was actually a class at Nomon with Paul, and it was hard surface. And usually when you do hard surface, it helps a lot to know like stuff like array mesh, like dynamic subdivision and stuff like that, right? So yeah, exactly. Somehow something is off in the position in relation to the world. Exactly, that's exactly it. So this is what, if you look at the size of this is like, well, it's almost perfectly 2. If I go to 2, well, not this one, this one. I go 2 and do like 2. This is perfectly what wrap mode is looking at. So if I do this, you can see it's happening on one side and the other. So what I want to do now is actually tweak my arrays to match this texture over here. And again, it's all a matter of scale. So in this case, I might need to scale this down a little bit. So I'm gonna scale this to like maybe like 0.75, maybe 0.5. I'm gonna make this really small. And it doesn't matter like how many trims. I can even add more detail maybe to this one. So in our array then, we're gonna fix this up real quick on stream. You're gonna see me troubleshoot stuff, which is also pretty helpful. So we're gonna do like 24. Was it 14? I don't know, it's 24. No, it wasn't 24, 28. And then let's go 28 over here. There we go. And this already matches that one. So I'm just reducing the size by 0.5 and then just changing the array to be twice the size. So again, scale this down. And in this case, this one doesn't really matter, the scale, because we're not using array mesh. So we're gonna just push this to the front a little bit and make it touch that other trim over there. So if I go ahead and push this there, actually let me keep this up on the front so I see what I'm doing. This is also just a single mesh, so I can easily just do something like this and keep the scale on, or maybe just reduce it a little bit. Again, it doesn't really matter. When it's a continuous mesh, we're going to use wrap mode anyway. But for something like this, for example, we might need to rethink our strategy over here. So I might need to maybe do like 0.5 and then just go, maybe not 0.5 though, maybe yeah, something like that. It also depends on the scale of what you want. I mean, if I was doing this as like a real representation of something, like for example, if I'm taking reference pictures from, I don't know, like I did in the Natural History Museum project, which was a group project, but I did the trim sheets there. And what I did was I took pictures of the patterns and tried to gauge the size of each pattern. And then you have to look at textile density to see like how tall in the texture should a pattern be, right? And then from there you gauge how many trims do you need on your trim sheet, right? Oh, you're manually putting it to snap. You mean like this? Like when it snaps to a value? That's by holding shift. So you start by pressing this, and then you press and hold shift, and it's gonna snap a value over there. So let me just tweak this to see if this fits now. It's actually gonna be 6 by 6. There we go. Yeah, something like that. And I want to scale this to something like that. And now I want to do maybe like 7 to 7. And I want to make this like there, so it tiles. And then we're gonna have, maybe we can cut this on the edges. I don't know. If I had, you know, if this was my nitpick, I would just gauge the size, the correct size of this, and do this all over again. But for this, in this case, it doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna scale this down a tad like that. I'm gonna actually scale this by half because that's what we've been doing. And it perfectly lines up with that. And now I'm gonna add like 8 by 8. Doesn't perfectly line up because that plane is not, the ratio is not correct. So something like this. Yeah, needs to be below this one. Yeah. Maybe I want to do maybe these. Or maybe this one I can actually just duplicate this plane and then just get a cube. Or I could just insert a cube, actually. I just insert another cube. Whoops. Ah, come on. So I'm gonna insert a new cube in this case, and this cube is already iffy. And there's no, like, our initialize button doesn't give me, because I changed the initialize for that mesh. So, but I'm gonna still do this. And then maybe something like that. And if I move this over here, it should match though. Let's try 4. There we go. Matches perfectly. Yeah, because again, like this plane that I brought in is based on the scale of ZBrush's world, let's say, right? And this cube as well. Like the gizmo cubes, etc., are not related to the world thingy, right? So that's why maybe it's better to use this one in this case, this scenario, and then just Dynamesh the crap out of this. There we go. I just want some cool patterns here, and I want this over there, and maybe flatten this out like so, and we got ourselves our little slabs. So I can delete this one, just delete this one. We're troubleshooting live, guys. This is what it's all about. So this one is the same thing. Maybe I want to duplicate this over by pressing Control and holding, and then I can split this up by going to split and mask points, and I want these ones to be shorter, maybe like 0.25, and I want these, I want the array to have, let me just put this over here, and I want this to be moved to have this be a little shorter too, like 0.5. So if it's always like even numbers, like power of 2s, basically this is 0.5, which means my array needs double the amount of instances, right? So if I put this up to 8 and an X amount, put it at 8 as well, it matches perfectly, if that's what I want. Which in this case, what I usually do is I bring in an extra one just to break up that, unless you want this seam over here to match perfectly, which is gonna look a little weird. Textile density is usually, if it's like a first person shooter, it's 10.24. 10.24 Jesus. So 10.24 is 1024 pixels per 100 units. So that's 10.24. That's first person shooters, right? So that means every 4 meters in real space you have a 4K texture, right? So that's literally it. So if you have like a big, like 4 meter tall wall, that's a 4K resolution texture. And that's where tileable textures and lower resolution tileable textures come in, because you can easily tile those, not spend that much memory using a full 4K texture. And if it's tiled properly, if it's not noticeable, then you mix that in with some props, etc., to hide the tiling. You can get away with it. For third-person shooters, usually it's 5.12, which is 512 pixel per 100 units. For like strategy games and top-down views, depending on your game, right? But that's like 2.56. So that's a 256 pixel unit per 100 meter. You can still get a 4K texture, but you're going to use a section of it, right? So that's the gist of it. So in this case, we're not looking at that because it's not relevant anyway. So yeah, that's basically how I measure my. I usually bring in like a 400 unit plane in Maya, and then just set the textile density to that, and that's it. Oh no, I'm not manually inputting anything. I'm gonna do that for. So what I mean by adding an extra one to offset this crease over here is that I can use Shift to just snap this and have like 0.12 kind of. You know, maybe it's gonna be a little longer, one of these bricks, but that's fine because we want to break up this. We want to offset it a little bit, right? So now, in the case of this one, this is going to be a little bit of a pickle because this is maybe not, maybe 0.5 in this case. So I can, maybe not 0.5, maybe something like that. And let me just move this over there. And now, yeah, this isn't correct anymore. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a cheat over here. So we want this repeat to be, let's try, I like power of 2 numbers. I'm gonna reset this X profile over here. And, oh, this is the rotate. Oh, Jesus. Getting all confused over here, guys. So let's do 32 and 32. And there we go. Matches perfectly, but maybe not 32, like 28, maybe. Maybe we could get away with 26. There we go. Perfectly matches up. And now this rotation thing that I'm doing to make it like be a little bit alternate, to have like an alternate slight rotation, is I'm going into the array mesh into the rotate tab, and I'm inputting the same number as, well, no, this is the input of the amount of rotation, right? So if I change this, you're gonna see a little bit of a shift, right? So I'm gonna put this at 12, and then the tiling on your curve needs to be sort of like the same here. So if I tile this to like 32, it's gonna go perfectly, right? So if I tile this to like half of it, it's usually half, right? Because otherwise it's gonna be the same, right? The same rotation throughout the entire thing. So if I tile this to like, so it's 26, so it's 13. You're gonna get an alternate rotation. So every other brick is gonna be shifted a little bit. What is this? Well, this is array mesh, right? It's a feature in ZBrush that allows you to do one model, and then it instances the rest of the section over here. I might want this to be a little bigger though, maybe taller. Maybe you can make it a little taller, like so. But let me do this one first. So let's do this at 0.5, like we've been doing. And I'm trying to match this to the best of my ability. Again, from top to bottom doesn't really matter. It's more from side to side. So array mesh now, I want this to do, right, this was, the array here was done. So I might need to go to a point where it wasn't baked in. So if I go over here, turn on array mesh and scale this to like 0.5. And we want to do something like this. And we want to do 8. There we go. And this ain't perfect, but it's what we get. So something along those lines. And we want to scale this to something like that. There we go. And it matches up perfectly. Right? That's what we want. We can actually get away with a few less here, like 7. Not 7 actually. We need to have even numbers. It's not gonna tile. Well, it is actually. Well, but it's for safekeeping, let's just keep it at 8. And then shift this 1 to the side, right? Like that. So that way we're perfectly sure that this is tileable, right? I need that Majin Buu. Well, this is my Majin Buu. I challenge you guys to join my Discord server and then just do your own versions of it. That's my challenge. How about that? How's that? Join the Discord server. I'm gonna plug it in. This was such a shameless plug, right? So here's our Discord server where we're planning on having actually competitions. There's the Discord server, and you're happy to share your own versions of Majin Buu. I actually have a video of that. I'll trade you a God of War head for Majin Buu. Okay, we can do a trade. It's fine by me. I have a time-lapse video on that Majin Buu on YouTube, though. If you want to know how to do the cam view thing, I think it was on my first stream or second stream here, that you can actually go back and see. And you can see there's a video by Ian Robinson on how to make your own cam views, and it's pretty easy to follow. It's a pretty easy to follow tutorial. That's how I got my knowledge from how to do this. I watched the stream that he was mentioning that, and I asked him, and he just shared the knowledge. And he plugged in a tutorial that I did. Something like this. Okay, so this is not matching perfectly. Okay. Something like that. We might need some extra patterns over here. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna do a flat wall. So this can go over here. This can go. Oh, this is actually already. Come on. Focal shift. That's a feature though. This can go over here. And this can be just a flat wall actually. So I'm gonna delete this. Flat wall, here we come. Now go to Z modeler. Let me actually try to match these. One other thing, when I want to test out the tiling, is at the end I do a live boolean that cuts the mesh into its perfect proportions, like texture proportions, and then I tile that using array mesh. And if it tiles perfectly in ZBrush, it's going to tile perfectly in Substance or Unreal. So let me just add a few edges here, keeping polygroups on. There we go. Make this square, uncrease all, and let's crease the edging. Right, so taking off transparency, and now we have it's a little bit better. Something like that. Right, there we go. And this one could be a little bit further up. And now we can start sculpting away. And going back to our little example here on our wrap mode. So now if I try to do like the wrap mode thingy, So let's do a dem standard just to test it out. So there's our little plane. And just stretch this out a little bit more. If I start sculpting, now it's fine. Yeah. So where's my plane? There's my plane. I push the plane to the back so I can see it. There it is. So now if I sketch this out, you can see it's tiling perfectly, right? So that was some troubleshooting for you guys right here live on ZBrush. ZBrush Live. So this is still not perfectly tileable, but we can manage that in a few different ways. Because this ratio is not correct. There we go. Let me get this over here. There we go. And now I'm gonna try to match that. It's very hard to do this manually though. Might as well just do another cube like we did before. I mean, this one doesn't really matter. I don't even want this to be like a separate thing. So I might as well just do the array and extrude. So if I do this, it's just a single stripe, right? Just going along like a single trim. So I can offset this a little bit, maybe scale this up. And now we got our, it's gonna have like some ornaments, like tiling, you know? I'll join, but I'll show you. Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. This Majin Buu isn't really that great. I don't know what you guys are all about, like, you know, drooling over this Majin Buu. This Majin Buu, like, the anatomy isn't even perfect. I'm gonna put this up on our next stream here. By the way, guys, ZBrush Summit's coming up. If you guys want to come to the ZBrush Summit to say hi, I'll be there. If you're not going to be at ZBrush Summit, I try to make up for it with you guys that follow my stream by doing longer streams every weekend on ZBrush Live. So this stream is actually going to be 3 hours. Next week's 4 hours. And the other week, which is right before the ZBrush Summit, it's going to be another 4 hours. So if I take a look at the scheduling here, it's 16th of September, it's going to be 4 hours, and the 23rd of September is going to be another 4 hours. So every week I'll be streaming on ZBrush Live, and that's literally it. And we're going to do a little portal around our sword thing, and possibly use some alphas with some patterns to create like details like carved into the rock where the sword's going to be stuck on. So here we go. So this again, it's gonna be perfectly tileable. So now if we go over to our, going back to where we were, I'm already lost a little bit. This is already wrap mode. So now if I do this, this is what's gonna happen, and this is what I want. So I want something like that, right? So now if I isolate this and I go to my morph brush, okay, so this needs another target over there, and now I can use the morph brush to just morph that detail away. I can actually bake all the texture, all the layers, because I've changed something in the mesh and I forgot that I had layers. So I'm just gonna use this as my base. Actually, let me go back before I apply this pattern and bake the layers here, and now create a new layer and go over to my damage kit brush. And try to get something that's, maybe I'm gonna get something different. Another brush that's less noisy. Maybe a cut like this one. Nope. Still a little too much. This one's great. So wrap mode on. Remember to do that. And now just do something like that. And maybe over here we're gonna have something like this. Or maybe something like that. Right? And this is our layer. And now we can go over to the morph brush and tweak this as it should with wrap mode on. At the end of the day, we can also use like some clay polish over here. And then at the end, what I usually do is I go over with the orb brushes, the flatten edge brush. Just have some, a little bit of a stylized look. So let's do that actually. I'm gonna use the, flatten edge brush. Oh, actually, before I do anything, wrap mode. Just a few taps here and there to make it look less noisy, because you don't want too much of a high frequency noise. There can be some on the actual cracks over there, but not a lot. And maybe something on these edges over here. This actually doesn't make a lot of sense, so I'm gonna sculpt that away, pressing Alt, and I'm gonna try to keep this more in line to what it should, what a stone crack would look like, so something like that, right? And you can also complement those with a slash curve brush. Again, let's go to wrap mode. And I usually do a little bit of some fine tuning on these cracks. Smooth this out and then just open up some sections of those cracks like so. And let's go back to our flatten edge. Whoops. Well, the trick is to do what is necessary. It looks good for cam view. Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly why I have it right there in the cam view. I can't stop. It's perfect for someone who has overdue projects and can stop the sculpt. Yeah, it is. Well, but here's the thing. challenges are a good way to keep you on your toes. I really liked doing the Star Wars challenge for ZBrush Central because it pushed me to do another like hard surface piece that I haven't been doing in forever, you know? So that's a cool thing, just looking at challenges and stuff. And that's one of the things that I want to do on my Discord server, just because it stimulates people to, it gets them to do stuff sometimes that's out of the comfort zone, you know? So, and I know I have a lot of like former students on the server as well, and they know that I'm all about, you know, pushing yourself out of the comfort zone. So that's my take on it. But I mean, I'm not forcing people to do the challenges, right? So let me just push this out, do something like that. Now another brush that I use a lot, and I use it for, actually let me just fix this thing because it's bothering me. Smooth this out. Let's get cracking. Ha, get it? Let's get cracking on those details. One other thing I could do is actually turn on Dynamesh for this one. Or maybe I can delete lower. Ah, right, it's in a layer, so I can't do that. So let's bake all the layers, starting to look good. So I'm baking it. And let me see how it stacks up on the texture. What the heck is that? There's something wrong over here. Something I did way over there that is not supposed to be there. There we go. So this is our first little trim, but it's still not perfect. I can still come in and do a little bit of detailing here and there, but you get the point. Now, why do I use array mesh instead of just sculpting these little separations there? It's because I don't want to have to go through and sculpt everything one by one, right? So what I usually do, and you saw this on one of the previous streams, is let me just apply this subdivision, smooth subdivision, and I think 90,000 is fine. Let me just check, just in case. Yeah, this is fine. So what I usually do is I make the overall bevels, let's say, here. Let me use the trim dynamic. I make this overall beveling over here. And then when you array, it kind of looks already like what you want. And then at the end, you just sculpt off the variations, like cracks and stuff like that, you know? So this is what I usually do. I'll go over to my flatten edge brush. Something like this. There's some repetition here and there, but I mean, it's not the end of the world. We can still get cracking. Something like this, right? Usually I don't even do like 28 repeats. I could do like 2 by 2, right? And this one I can, for example, mirror across. So I can mirror on the Z axis. And now I append a new, and instead of doing 28, I'm gonna do 14 by 14. And now we have like a little bit of variation. So now basically this one right over here is rotated. It's not rotated, it's mirrored, right? So it's actually showing the back of this. So I can have on the back a little bit of a different sculpt. So let me do like trim dynamic a little bit like that, right? Maybe something like this. Maybe something like that, right? And now I can go over with my flatten edge. Just do a little bit of that faceting over there. Whoops. So now if I turn on Ray Mesh, you can see there's a little bit of a breakout on that repetition, and it still works nicely with our tiling, right? What is the benefit of using layers and morph brush? You can use undo history and go back and well, the morph, it's not morph targets and layers is not a matter of going back and forth. It's more like you want to mix in different types of detail. You can use layers, and you want to use the morph target as an eraser. That's usually what I do. So in this case here, I'm using the morph target brush, the morph brush actually, to erase stuff. There's the undo history. So if I want to erase this, I can just go over here with the morph and morph it back to that section, right, where it's marked in the history. This is what the morph brush does for me, right? The layers is more, let me exemplify this in a different way, right? So let's say, all right, I have another layer on top of this one, right? And let's say I have some more like noise, like texture noise or whatever. Or actually, let's say I'm gonna sculpt with this brush over here, like a rock detail brush. And I wanna do rep mode on, and I wanna drag this off and do some weird like rock patterns, whatever. And then I'm like, maybe this is a little bit too strong. So let's turn off the recording mode, and I can just use this as slide, or even invert that detail. I can inverse the detail. So this is the power of layers, right? So if you do your layering, you can see this is where I fixed that issue over there. So you have multiple, usually I do layers for stuff like surface noise. I do surface noise in multiple layers, and then I blend them together as I want. So at the end of the day, if I want something like this, right, and I bake all my layers, and now I want to do surface noise layers. Let's say I want this little noise over here, and I want this as one layer, right? It's already deforming a little bit too much for my taste, but I mean, it's fine. Just make it a little thinner. Something like that, right? So let's say I want to have that surface noise on this layer, right? So if I turn off, whoops, let me bake. So create another layer and then apply this noise to the mesh, right? But let's say I want another type of noise. And in this case, I want to do, maybe I don't want an alpha, and maybe I want something that's more procedurally generated. So I might want to do like a plateau here. And maybe I want some more high frequency stuff happening over here, and then I want to inverse this. I want some breakup like that, right? And I can tweak the scale, and I have that breakup over there anyway. So maybe this one, we don't need this one. Maybe we can go over here. Whoops. Yeah. So there we go. Maybe we want these little cracks over here, like with surface noise. And you're like, okay, maybe I want this to be stronger. And just to showcase what I mean. So let's say you want something like this, right? I press OK, and I'm like, okay, let's apply this to the mesh. I apply this to the mesh, and I'm like, this is too strong, right? So now I can go over to our layers, and oh, Jesus, what the heck's going on? This is not supposed to happen. Let me just go roll it back. Does it have coloring? Let me delete this layer. Create another layer on top of this one. This one is that morphing thing, right? And this is supposed to have the surface noise, which for some reason it applied poly paint. I don't know why. Okay, but you have this, right? So just to be sure you understand, like this layer just has that little deformation, right? That little noise over there. And this layer should also not have any poly paint. So let me just record, and I'm gonna apply the white color to this. It's not applying the color. That is weird indeed. Yeah, this noise that I applied color for some reason. Alright, let me delete this one too. There we go. And I want to apply this white color, just to make sure that it is that flat color over there. Alright, create a layer. Let's say this noise, right? Apply it to mesh. And then I'm like, that's too much. I can slide it back and control this after the fact. And again, if I have, okay, I like this, where this is going. Let's say like this, maybe a little less strong, like something like that. And then I create another layer. And I go, okay, I want a different type of noise this time around. So maybe if I just reset this, and I want some more like granular, sort of like stone pattern, rock, you know, detailing. So maybe do something like that, and maybe this should be inverted a little bit to add to that little bit of a destruction. Again, this is more of like for realistic kind of environments, because in stylized this is already like too much information. But for the sake of the explanation, all right? So, and then I stop the record. I apply this to the mesh, and I stop the recording. Maybe I want to apply this with a little bit stronger noise, something like that. All right, so I apply this, stop the recording. I'm like, this was too strong. Let's just roll it back a little bit. And now maybe I want more of this one. You can see what's going on. So it's basically kind of like Photoshop layers. Kind of. It's not the same thing. Yeah. So this is how I use layers. But the morph target is just a non-destructive kind of assurance that I can roll back always, right? So for example, this is the layer, right? So if I go over here and I store a morph target, and I go over there, whoops, like so, right? And then I can come over here in another layer and go to morph. I can morph it to, oh wait, let me see if the morph target's there. Yeah, there it is. So I can morph and delete this after the fact. So after the fact, I just slide that layer of the noise to 0, set a morph target for that, store a morph target, then roll it back to 1, create another layer, and then use the morph brush to just erase some of these surface noise patterns. So let's say this is a little too much. I don't want that. Maybe this is also a little bit too much, so I don't want that as well. I can just come over here. Let me just use the focal shift down to 0 so I can actually do more of a like a rocky kind of feel to it. So then you're sort of hand tweaking the surface noise that you just did, right? So maybe I don't want any noise here because this is already too much over there. This is also too much, so I can just go over like so. So I'm using the morph target as an eraser, basically. That's the short answer. This is also too much, so let me just take a look at it. Yeah, this looks fine. This is actually adding some interest to that, which is cool. Okay. And remember, the morph brush is in wrap mode, so you want to make sure that this is tiling. You go over here. You can see it's morphing that section. I just don't want any noise on that section because that's going to be where it tiles, right? And the noise is procedurally placed. So the morph brush also allows me to check if that seam over there is clean without noise. So then I can make that noise happen some other way. Right, cool. So this is our sort of little first section on the surface, on the trim sheet. And the same thing goes for this one over here. Oops. Come on. This one over here. So maybe we have this pattern right here. And now if I apply the array mesh. So first I apply this one. Right, there's subdivisions. Delete lower. Let me do a quick save just to be sure. Yeah, so basically I use a lot of features like array mesh and wrap mode to just make my entire trim sheets. Design patterns using alphas, etc. You can go over that on a future stream. And then there's tileable textures as well, which I use Dynamesh a lot for tileable like ground textures, you know, like, and maybe some grass and stuff. I use Dynamesh to create like little what do you call those little wooden things? Can't remember. Whatever. So you can create a lot of like little meshes that are going to be spawned around procedurally in the floor to create tileable textures using Dynamesh. That's also pretty cool. But yeah, so usually this is the process. Just go over here. And there's another thing. So let's say this is my, let me just Dynamesh this thing. So this is my slabs, right? And I want to break this up. Let me just bring this, my pure ref over here. I have some references here. And if I want to break this up, one of the cool things we could do is if I make mesh and then let me do an auto groups. I have multiple groups over here, right? And the cool thing about Dynamesh is that you can turn on groups over here. Groups. And this means that even if they're touching, but they're a separate polygroup, they're going to be Dynameshed separately, right? So they're not going to weld together. So one of the cool things I do is I bring in my slice curve brush. Where's the slice curve? Oh, Jesus. Slice curve brush. And I tap this one, and let's say I wanna have like this. Oh, Jesus, this Dynamesh is horrible. I just realized that I had dynamic subdivision turned on. So let me just apply that dynamic first. And now delete lower. And now Dynamesh. Dynamesh to this resolution. And there we go. And now Dynamesh with groups on, maybe blur down to 0. Let me do the picker. Whoops. There we go. And now I wanna, yeah, I wanna slice this like that, maybe. Maybe I wanna have like this. Something like this, right? And now if I Dynamesh again, actually before this, I need to make the array. Otherwise it's gonna do it for every single one of them. So I'm gonna make mesh over here. And then I can auto group. And then I can do this little thing. Whoops. Yeah, maybe something like this. Doesn't really matter for this example. Right, so now if I Dynamesh again. Whoops. Why is it not Dynameshing? Yeah, I need to sculpt something over here. It's not Dynameshing though. Oh, right. Yeah, you can't have anything hidden. So if I Dynamesh again, it's gonna separate that into its own sort of group. Before that, let me just raise the resolution a little bit. There we go. And now you have this, maybe a little bit more. We do open circle, Dynamesh. There we go. It's gonna look at the mesh and its detail. So now we have this, and now we can go over and smooth the border over there. And we can even come over here and maybe do like a knife. Where's a knife curve? Knife curve. Just, whoops. Ah, it's not. Let me just do a clip. Then I'm gonna Dynamesh everything. And here's the cool thing. Now with the gizmo control, press that section and you're just modeling this little mesh over here. So going over, what we need to do is just keep clipping this section and doing some more work. So flatten edge, whoops, flatten edge. Yeah, this is a lot of detail. Dynamesh was a little bit harsh. So let me try something over here, or cracks. Let me try this. Right, like that. And now I can do, whoops, trim dynamic. Just trim that edge over there. And trim that edge too. And this one is a tricky one because this is a little curved over there. So we can just press Alt, do some trim dynamic like that. Ah, damn it. Backface mask turned on. If you don't know what backface mask does, it doesn't apply to the other side of the mesh. Just go over to brush, auto masking. And there's backface mask right there. I just have it right there, over there because I use it all the time. So I'll just do something like this. Get started with no, just, oh, we could actually just clip this section over there. And now we have a little bit of a dent. You know, can also bring in like a slash, right? You can look at the reference to see if I'm missing something. So, whoops, flatten edge over here. Trying to flatten these edges to make it a little harsher, that transition. Right. Gonna do a little bit of a slash curve over here. Big fan of these brushes, by the way. If any of you guys know Michael Vincente, send him my regards. Oh, this is too much. There we go. And one other cool thing now, since we have the wrap mode on, let me just go over here to the trim dynamic just to flatten this up. Doesn't need to be perfect because this is gonna get some rock noises anyway. So one cool thing we can do is just go over to this rock detail mesh. And you can use any pattern you want. Any alpha, basically. It's the alpha that's the key in this case, right? So if you have like any other like stylized alpha or whatever, just use it with a drag rect brush. And now we can come over here. Might need to tweak that, the size of this anyway. I mean the height. We'll try clip this. Clip it from the side. Whoops, that was too much. There we go. Same thing goes for over here. Just clip the corners a little bit. Oops, okay, this already has that noise, which is cool because now after the noise it gives you this, it's not like a straight line, right? So it's gonna be a little bit different. It's gonna be less even, let's say. Something like that. Your perspective on? No. Okay. And there we go. This might have been a little too much, this cut over here, so I just want a slight taper. Another thing that we could do, we could use a little brush called the bevel brush, bevel flat, and just do this. You know? So we could just go over and do something like that. And flatten the crap out of this. See what's going on? So, but in this case I don't think this works that well. Might work for like a slight bevel. No, it doesn't really work like I wanted. There we go. We want to go over and do a little bit of edging. doing some manual clips over here. Then we can always pinch those together, you know. The whole work at once, you know, like this. The trim sheet. We're doing a trim sheet, so it's a little bit more technical than you might expect. So in this case, I want to do this one and this one together, and I want to go and do a flatten maybe. So maybe I want to flatten this to that edge over there. So there we go. We could also do trim normal, but in this case this works fine. So trim dynamic over here, then we're gonna re-Dynamesh. There we go. Right. Same thing goes for this section. Now let's do a little bit of a flatten edge. Like that, like that, like that. So we got our little edging over there. I could also do the slash first. Let's try this. So let's say I want to have a little bit of a pattern going, I don't know, like this. Oops, used to be. Right? There's a little bit of noise there. Doesn't really matter. So now I have this reference over here, right? So what I want to do is slice this. In this manner. So I need to be more precise with this. So. Trying to match that as best as I can. And now I can Dynamesh. Now if I go over here and smooth this, I can actually try to the trim dynamic. The thing is, when a Dynamesh, it's basically doing a close holes, and the close holes gives you this weird, you know, curve when it welds the thing. We could use the knife curve instead of that, but we're not going to, not this time. So it's just to have that little bit of detail over there. Try to get that beveling kind of to a good spot. And this, you can try to cover it up. Right, so now let me do a little bit of pinching here because I want to straighten this up. So these now will get pinched. So if I do, whoops, with lazy mouse on, let me try to pinch this. Something like this, and now if I do something more like that, right? Make this less samey, let's say. Right? Now I can still go over here and do a little bit of work. Whoops. Freaking, my tablet's going AWire. There we go. Right. Now another cool thing is that we can chop some parts off on this, because I'm feeling that it might be a good idea to have that section, to have some irregularities on our little seams. So let me try something like that. Yeah. And then something like this. Maybe not that much, but yeah, but this one still needs that good old-fashioned beveling. And now we can go over and do a little bit more of there we go. Maybe not that even though. Maybe something. Whoops. Wrong. Faced the wrong way. So something like that. Right? And we got a little bit of some variation on that. Same thing goes here. We could just use the other techniques we've been using. So let me create a layer, create an undo history point, and let me check some brushes here. So some damage brushes. Let me try these ones. XMD stylized. Yeah, okay. Okay. They feel like more like scratches than anything else, like something for like wood grain. Yeah, this doesn't feel right. Let me see the damage kit. This is too much. Let's see this one. This one's cool. It's a cool alpha. So wrap mode on. Okay. So I want to have some breakup over there, but I don't want it here. So what I want to do now is go over to my morph brush. Come on. No, it doesn't. Ugh. So let me try. I don't want any over here. I just want that breakup over there. That one. Actually, maybe I don't want this at all like that. I want this. To match that a little bit more. And now all I want is this section over here. So I can go over to the morph brush, just morph it back, just like that. And maybe I don't want this top one. The cool thing about morph brush is that you can have something like this, right? So you have a little bit of some slabs over there. Maybe they're too much. This is a little bit too much for what we want. So if that's the case, there's your layers for you. So let me start recording and dull this back just a little bit. Right, so new layer. And now I wanna, maybe I want the clip. Maybe I don't want a clip to be like this, but so maybe I want something like that. And now let's go over to our flatten edge to get, whoops, to get something cleaner. Something like that, right? And then we can emphasize it a little bit with this brush, the slash curve brush. Mallet fast over there. There we go. This is still very low res Dynamesh, I feel. Maybe we need a little bit more resolution, or maybe not. Maybe this is good enough. So this is the other example, right? Second, like slabs and stuff that could go around the wall, like, you know, maybe a small section of the wall. Whoops. Let me put this in the middle and scale it down just a tad. Maybe that was too much. Yeah, something like that. There we go. Right? And the same thing goes for everything else. So let me just wrap this up in terms of like what we can do. And in terms of tileable textures, I already showed you like a couple of tricks for wrap mode. Thank you. I mean, you guys are so into the Majin Buu thing. I might as well just do a Dragon Ball environment. What do you guys think? Like Master Roshi's house, or maybe the world of the Kais, or something like that. I don't know how that would go, since it's like it's an IP, you know. I don't know how the Twitch thing kind of works when doing something like this. But I mean, that would be cool. The time capsule, yeah. Oh, the time capsule is actually a pretty good idea to showcase like the whole thing about around like array mesh. Actually, the time capsule works. Like array mesh, there's some Sculptris Pro potential there with the moss and all of that. Surface noise. You guys are giving me cool ideas. This is iterative process, you know? Like, I'm just like, okay, you guys like the Majin Buu so much, I might as well just do a Dragon Ball environment. Because why not? You know? No, I'm not Brazilian. I'm Portuguese. I speak Portuguese, so yeah. So that's why the name sounds Portuguese. Brazilian, you know, because it's Portuguese. But yeah, no. I'm Portuguese. First Portuguese streamer on ZBrush Live, you know? So yeah. So it's really cool to watch, like, Ana Carolina's stream, because sometimes she just switches to Portuguese and I can completely understand her. And I can see some of the chat going like, what the heck was that? Because, you know, it's a little bit weird. But for me, it's just, I don't even notice that. It's like, oh, okay. She's speaking English and then she's speaking Portuguese. And I'm like, you know. But I can understand that a lot of people would be like, whoa, what language, what alien language is she's speaking right now? Because she goes back and forth sometimes. From the beginning, first Portuguese streamer. Thank you. Thank you so much. Queres que eu fale português? Eu estou a falar português agora. Yeah. Did you get any of that? It's Portuguese. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, I haven't lived abroad. I've been in Portugal my entire life. I just went to the UK for a couple of months when doing my master's degree. And so all my English is picked up from watching Dragon Ball, basically, in the English dub. No, I'm kidding. Like movies, you know, cartoons is a big part of it, of course, you know, but yeah. Hey, Cayenne. Salve por Rodolfo. The resolution is enough, alright. Oh, you mean the trim sheet? Yeah, this is more than enough in terms of resolution. And I might just work on this a few more hours outside of stream so I don't bore the heck out of you guys, you know, when doing stuff like this. Because I understand that a lot of people just go into ZBrush Live to watch, like, character artists and stuff like that. Do, you know, characters, which is, you know, up front, it's way more appealing. It's a character, right? This environments, you don't get to see the full picture, let's say, until you get all your assets. Like, textures and modular assets and all that, and then you assemble everything. That's when you start seeing how the environment will actually look like, and it might look appealing and less boring, you know? It's just that in my mind I already have the mental picture of the environment, so to me it's kind of like I'm walking towards that. But for someone just watching, I can totally understand if it's like, what the heck is he just doing, like rocks? He's just doing like weird patterns on mud, you know? That's what I am. I'm the mud artist. The artist that does mud and grass, you know? The weird guy that looks at the ground in the street and people think he's insane, you know? Yeah, well, a lot of people, again, because in Brazil, there's a lot more people than in Portugal. Portugal is a small country, you know? So when people ask, like, they assume, like, Brazilian is like a language, but it isn't. It's Portuguese. It's Brazilian Portuguese, but it's still Portuguese. So it's the same language. It's like American English and British, UK English, you know, like English from the UK. But it's the same difference in terms of, like, you know, there's an accent difference and there's a little bit, like, a few words that are different, but it's everyone can understand, like, each other, basically, you know, unless you have, like, a very super specific accent from, like, a remote location in Brazil or a remote location in Portugal that has a very specific accent. That's a very hard thing to understand, actually. Even in Portugal, some regions in Portugal, they have a very, very cute different accent. On the news, for example, they put subtitles. Because it's even for Portuguese from, like, let's say the main cities like Porto and Lisbon, right? Sometimes there are certain accents that are harder to understand, like Azores Portuguese, you know? Why do you want me to speak Portuguese, man? Like 90% of the viewers wouldn't understand a thing. if you're Madeira and Madeira, not so much in Madeira, but more like the Azorians, like San Miguel, like the island of San Miguel, which is a very particular accent that is in the news. Sometimes they put subtitles, and that's kind of weird because they're speaking Portuguese, but they speak so fast and in a very acute accent that a lot of people just have a hard time understanding. But you know, if you lived with some Azorian roommates like I did in college, you'd get used to, not roommates, but from my class, there were a lot of people from Azores, and you'd get used to it pretty quick. So there we go. This one, I feel we can just get away with doing a little bit of a pattern over there. So maybe just go something like this. Is the wrap mode turned on? There we go. Oh, also one thing I advise you guys to do in this workflow is to turn on wrap mode for the smooth brush, because a lot of people forget that. They just go, whoa, crazy noises like this, right? And then they start smoothing, and they don't realize that they're just smoothing this side, but not this one. So you go over to you press, well, whatever you do, like go to the brush tab, right? On wrap mode, but you have to press shift. So now you're in the smooth brush, and you want to have wrap mode turned on for that. So now when you're smoothing both sides. You see? Now it's smoothing on both sides over here. So another thing is that we might want to do a very subtle kind of rock detail. So let's do less intensity, back face mask, and just go over some patterns over here. And then we can just do a little bit of a flatten edge over here. Not flatten edge. First I go over with a trim dynamic. That's right. Because this was creased. You have to remember that. When I divided it, was creased. So there's more geometry concentrated there than it should be. So you have to, you either smooth those edges or you trim dynamic the heck out of them. So go over. Sometimes I just smooth them. And that's why you want to have the wrap mode on your smooth brush as well. So you can then just go over here. Let me do the mallet fast brush. So I can just tap over here. Just tap to get those facets over there. And then we're gonna polish the heck out of that, because I don't want that noise over there. Again, to me, all of these techniques I learned while I was doing my master's degree, and I only worked in realism. So basically, I'm used to a lot of workflows that I use for realism, and sometimes I just get carried away, and I put up too much detail or too much. I don't simplify enough when you're doing stylized, right? When you're doing stylized stuff, it's all about simplification. So I like to hear it. It's okay for me. So you're Brazilian or Portuguese? Isaim Rusteflan. That's not, I don't think that's a Portuguese name. Is that a Portuguese name? Isaim Rusteflan. It doesn't sound like, at least not from Portugal. So let me go over maybe just a regular H polish wrap mode. and just start cleaning up these edges over here like that. Guys, if any of you guys are going to the ZBrush Summit, be sure to go and say hello. I'll be there I'll actually be in Hollywood from the 26th of September because I want to adapt to the time zones, you know, because it's 8-hour difference between Portugal and Los Angeles. So if you guys are around, just be sure to text me either on Discord or on Instagram, and we can catch up. I mean, I'm fine with that. So if any of you guys are going to the summit, I'll be there. If you guys have any... Well, if you guys have any questions, you might as well just ask Ian and Paul and you know, and Louis, because they're the experts there, right? If there's something in ZBrush that needs to be showcased, I can't think of better people to showcase it than Paul, Louis, and Ian. I mean, those three are like the three musketeers of ZBrush, you know? The three ZBrushiers. That's gonna be a new thing. I'm gonna tell him. I'm gonna tell Ian, hey, you're part of the three ZBrushiers, or musketeers of ZBrush, or whatever. So there we go. This is a little wavy. Maybe I just press Alt and do. And usually I don't just leave the rock noise, like I just drag the stuff in and leave it like that. You just go over and do some taps with H-polish to flatten it up a little bit. And one cool thing that I want to show you guys before we call it a day, if you want to, because sometimes when you use these brushes over here, for example, it's a little too deep. You see that? There's a lot of noise as well, so you can change the alpha. We can do a little bit of a, maybe a little bit of a blur. Maybe we can blur it a little bit more. So you can change the alpha on some of these brushes, even the ones that come with the XMD toolbox. And we can make a max range over here. And now you can see it's not as, but it's also a little bit blurry, right? But you can tweak whatever you want here with the alpha. Just do modify, and you're actually modifying the actual alpha. You can see it's a little bit blurry. If I turn this back to 0, it's less blurry, right? So you can add contrast, adjust the actual alpha. So if I do maybe something like this, like a levels, right? So you're basically, it's like Photoshop levels. So you can tweak this on the fly, or maybe make this look, you know, weird for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, so you can tweak the alpha, but the thing is, let me just reset this whole thing. The thing is that I want to show you is thick skin, that I use that as well. So if I turn on thick skin, let me just start with a clay buildup. So if I start sculpting, it caps off at that distance, that thickness, right? And this is cool if you're doing stuff that you want to look like, you want to have it look like clay and stuff like that. You're using thick skin for that. What I usually do is I turn on this to, like, I don't know, like 4 in this case, because this is related to the world scale, right? And I use these brushes but with thick skin. So if I use these brushes with thick skin, here's what happens. It starts capping, right? So I want to put this to a point where it's like you can get fairly deep, but then it caps at a certain point, because I don't want it to go like infinitely until the, you know, to the, I don't want to go too deep, because again, it doesn't benefit me in any way. There's going to be some ambient occlusion, but that's fine. That's cool. So now you get something that's a little, and the fact that it has that, now if you run like a clay polish on it, that actually gets crisp as well. So this is also cool. So if you go over here to clay polish, it's not over here, it's in geometry, clay polish. There we go. And let's just run a clay polish on this. And you can see it's looking at that edge over there as well, which is cool for me. But at the moment, I want maybe a little bit softer. I want a little bit of sharpness. You want something like this, right? So you get a clay polish, which gives it a little bit more of a stylized kind of look, which is something that I'll do for this one as well. And when I'm not really sure if the detail, this is like too much detail, for example, if I just run a clay polish, not like this, but they haven't added a copy button. This would be cool to add a copy button for the clay polish. I mean, but that's very niche, but you know, so let me just raise the softness over here, maybe not the repeat sharpness, and do a little bit of a clay polish. Maybe I want to soften this up a lot more and repeat the sharpness. This is too much. This softness is too much. You can change the angle as well. Angle at which it runs the clay polish. But yeah, I mean, this is not going to fix because it has a lot of like high frequency detail, but you know what I mean. So this is cool to just get clean cut edges using technically brushes that are made to be more realistic. So for example, if I do the same thing but with this brush that's a little bit more realistic, you can see that it has a lot of those noise. This is because the alpha is not let me see, fall off, blur. All right, no blur, noise. Yeah, this alpha is not perfect, let's say. So let me go through and do a little bit of a thick skin. Let me go back to where we had our thick skin on, because I still want to use the same thickness, right? So it kind of welds together as well. So if I wanted something like this, I could get something like this, you know, to break up that edge. And you can basically blend this workflow with whatever we've been talking about for the rest of the stream, like with morph targets, with layers, with whatever you want. So I could have stored a morph target, and I could do it after the fact. I could go back to this section, store an undo history tab there, or an undo point, and then use my morph brush to just morph this to that target, right? So I could just go over and do some cool transitions, but just break up that section over there, for example. So in this case, let me exemplify this in another way. So if I use a brush that's fairly more realistic, like this one, right? This has a lot of those high frequency noise. So I could go over here to the alpha tab and just push the contrast a little bit. And now you can see there's less of that like high frequency granular noise, because the alpha is basically a levels, right? We're doing like a little levels over here. And now what we can do is run this. Well, actually the thick skin is off. Is the thick skin off? No, it isn't. Maybe I need less thickness. Maybe I want this to be like that or something. You know? And, well, it's fine actually for this stylized piece, but let me just grab the alpha and push it down a little bit. Like that, right? Maybe the thickness should be like 5. There we go. And let's say now I wanna have this cut be cleaner, right? So now I add a, basically let me do this but with layers so I can showcase something to you. So there it is. And let's do the thing. We're here. Actually, let me do this just to check if it's, yeah, wrap mode is working fine. Cool. And now we want to go over to our clay polish, run a clay polish. Well, it's not perfect, but you can still like smooth out by inverting the mask. And now you get something, it's a little cleaner. Maybe you want to tweak those values over there. This repeat sharpness is just too much. I just want a little bit more sharpness. And maybe I don't want to repeat soft. There we go. And you get something that's a little bit more stylized, and then add to that, you can get over to our morph brush and just morph it back. This is the thick skin. There's some conflict there with thick skin. That's weird. Yeah, but you know what I mean. So basically it's just morphing back something. Maybe I don't want this little detail, or maybe I don't want this big one. I just want let me get the focal shift. Maybe I just want that section over there. So I don't want to add anything more than necessary, like a little cut over there. So now I can go over with our flattened edge and just start making some good old hand sculpting. Not everything needs to be voodoo in ZBrush. Just good old sculpting sometimes goes a long way. So there we go. Yeah, the clay polish, here's the problem with the clay polish. It does this to your topology. So what you want to do is, what I usually do actually, is I tap in this. So now I have another point in that history. And now I re-Dynamesh this. I don't think this was Dynamesh though. Yeah, but I get that resolution over there. Maybe open circle. Dynamesh. Mesh has layers, of course. So now let's bake this layer. Let's Dynamesh the whole thing. Jesus, I'm afraid it's gonna crash. But now that I have that tab over there, I can go over to Subtool, Project, and use Project History instead of projecting the whole thing. So if I project History now, it's gonna project back the detail so it stays clean, like those clean cuts we had before. It's gonna project that anyway, but it's gonna have a more even distribution, except that it's crashing. No, it isn't. It just takes a while. Okay, so you can see now that topology is more sculptable. Hi, Rodolfo, I'm loving with this pipeline for character design. Characters in ZBrush, character props in Maya and ZBrush, clothes and marvels are ZBrush, with topology in Maya or Topogon. Texturing, substance painter, rigging in Maya, render in Marmoset. Is that okay? I mean, of course it's okay. I'm not your parents. I mean, dude, you learn whatever you want to learn. That's usually, yeah, everything you said, it's great. That's industry standard software. Baking in Marmoset. Marmoset has a great baking toolkit. That's also cool. I usually use Substance Designer. Well, Painter now it's fine, but it used to be that Substance Designer's Baker was faster and better. So I used to bake with Substance Designer. But Marmoset is also industry standard, so you're fine either way. And yeah. So that's cool. Yeah, so characters in ZBrush, character pro. Retopology again, there's Maya, Topogon, ZBrush. I use ZBrush for all my retopology to be frank. And clothing, Marvelous. Of course, like Marvelous is standard as well for clothing, but if you want to get away with really cool, quick clothing, I have a cool video that you're gonna love. That's actually the Bungie presentation from last year's ZBrush Summit. That's over here. Bungie. There it is. The first section over here. There's the what was her name? Let me see if I can check it out. So they brought in a couple of ZBrush artists that worked on Destiny 2, and they did a demo on clothes, basically clothing an entire character. They did a little demo, and it's just insane. It's just insanely fast how you can get away with something really quick that kind of works, and then you can add to it with something like Marvelous and stuff like that. So there it is. That's your Bungie presentation for last year's ZBrush Summit. That's one of my references for cloth thing. Dynamics, basically, using dynamics in ZBrush. But yeah, if you were gonna go the character route, you definitely want to learn Marvelous Designer, of course. But there's a lot of stuff that you can do in ZBrush that in a lot of cases it works. You don't need something super complex, you know. So there it is. And there's also the weapon designer. There's also a weapon designer, goes through like weapon design in ZBrush. But for stuff like that, I would say the Doom presentation from ZBrush Summit 2021 is one of my favorite videos, actually, of all time. It's just insane. They break down how they did the whole game, basically, is ZBrush, you know? From characters to weapons to environment assets to hard surface, organic, both together. And it's just insane what they showcase there. It's just, I love that presentation. It's one of my favorite presentations of all time. And I'm kind of praying that this year's presentations will be as good. It usually is. Like the ZBrush Summit never disappoints, you know, because I'll be there. So I want to witness that with my own eyes. And I think there's a couple of presentations that are going to be exclusive for in-person people because of the NDA stuff, you know. I think it's the Diablo 4, like the Blizzard, you know, Overwatch 2, Diablo 4. I think it's an exclusive presentation. I might be wrong. Just double check on the website. But I know that some presentations are not going to be stored for later rewatching. And I totally get that. I mean, it's stuff that's, you know, protected by NDAs and stuff like that. And they just open exception for the actual presentation. It's probably going to be... we're going to have a warning saying we can't record and stuff like that. It's just the usual stuff. I went to THU, I went to a couple of talks like that, and you're really not allowed to. If someone catches you like recording anything, you know, sensitive stuff. Sometimes it's stuff that it hasn't even been released yet, you know, that they showcase. And I always love those, you know, those presentations because I feel like I know what to expect when it comes out. You know what I mean? It's like when it comes out, you feel like you're kind of gauging that based on what you saw previously. So it's good that I can make clothes in ZBrush and Marvelous. Also, I like ZBrush Hard Surface, ZModeler. Most people think that is hard, but I think ZModeler is underappreciated, to be honest. I see a lot of people. I'm going to do a little side project that you guys are going to see. And I'm going to use ZModeler for organic stuff. That's the thing. It's like sometimes it's just quicker. And it has a steep learning curve. I can concede that it has a steep learning curve. Especially from someone that, and I'm speaking as a Maya, former full Maya user. Someone coming from something like Maya, that is a very strict way of modeling and selecting things, especially Maya that has a very specific way of selecting things, right? As opposed to something like 3ds Max, maybe, that is basically, it's modifiers, right, on selections and stuff like that. But Maya is a very specific thing that you actually select what component you want to select, and then you select it, and then you execute an operation, or you turn on a tool and just interact with it. ZModeler is a little different. It's a different mindset, right? You need a little bit of a different mindset. And then once you get into the mindset, it's like 10 times faster than Maya. That's why I never model anything from scratch in Maya anymore. I just use ZBrush. And it's not that Maya is bad, ZBrush is good. It's just different, right? And once you get into the mindset, it's just... You work with whatever works for you, right? But at the end of the day, you want to go a little bit faster. And if I can avoid just going back and forth between two pieces of software and just stick to ZBrush, I'll just do it, you know? Why not, especially like you said, for clothing? Like, yeah, some things it's better to use like Marvelous Designer, because it's a very specialized tool to do very precise cuts and seams and very precise simulations and stuff like that. But for most of the projects, let's just be honest, for most of the clothing that people do, like a shirt or whatever, or maybe, I don't know, like some shorts or a pair of jeans or whatever, you can very, very easily just get away with ZBrush Dynamics. And nobody will know the difference. Unless you're doing like incredibly complex, like 18th century Victorian era freaking garments, you know? Then yeah, do learn Marvelous Designer, because that's going to be a pain to doing that. It's not impossible. I can already, there's a couple of ideas just starting to pop in my mind already of how to do that, but it's not impossible. But yeah, do something that's more specialized in Marvelous Designer. But for most of the cases, you want to model a skirt, or you want to model, I don't know, whatever, that's fairly usual, that you see it's fairly simple garments, Dynamics goes a long way. Well, again, that is up to the user. People just get used to their tools. I've been a Maya user for 10 years. I can tell you that. And for me, it was really, really hard to get into ZModeler, but I forced myself to do ZModeler. I know that there were people in class, in Paul's class at Nomon, that just refused to use ZModeler and went back to Maya and did the ZModeler section in Maya and then brought it into ZBrush. And I mean, it works, it's fine, you do whatever you want, but I decided to force myself to just stick to ZBrush. It's a ZBrush class, I'll just stick to ZBrush. And at the end of the day, I can tell you I'm way faster in ZBrush than Maya when I'm doing ZModeler. And I can be pretty fast in Maya because it's 10 years, you know? So it's all up to the individual person. I know people that are faster in 3ds Max, of course. It's whatever works for you, you know? There are people that would say, oh, but I'm way faster in Blender. Yeah, sure. Like, the software doesn't really matter when you're doing box modeling, but there are things that ZBrush can do that I can guarantee you that 3ds Max or Maya can't do. QMesh is a good example. There's no QMesh in 3ds Max or Maya, unless you have like some sort of weird plugin that's like, you know, out of the box, QMesh isn't replaceable. QMesh is like extrude on steroids, you know? That's one example. So there's other things like the gizmo. You can do project primitives. Let me just show you something here. So let me say I want to project a primitive here. There you go. I have a primitive. And now we can change the primitive type. So I want to maybe some cylinders over there. And maybe I want this cylinder to be like that. I want a cylinder projected there. And maybe I want this to be a little different in terms of shape. So maybe I want this like that. And I want this radius, like this fall off radius, to be a little different. Maybe the actual shape itself could be a little different. So maybe I want it subtractive. So I want to go like this. And now, where was the modifier? Is this? Yeah, so I can modify this to make it look like more tapered like this. This is probably the most complex gizmo deformer that you have in ZBrush. There's a lot more examples. There's a lot of cones here, and I can't remember everything on these cones, but I know that there's a way here to control that blend over there. There it is. So I can do something like this, and then just do like a socket, you know? And here's the topology. It's perfectly Dynameshed. This is one example. This is one thing that you can't find in any deformer in Maya. Or you can using booleans, but this isn't booleans. This is just a projection, right? Booleans is a whole different thing. Yeah, Smart Extrude. I know Smart Extrude. That's not QMesh. But yeah, I get your point as well. Like, there's things that each software has that other software don't, so it's irrelevant to a point which software you use. For box modeling, when it comes to like sculpting, don't give me that crap. ZBrush all the way. ZBrush #1. I don't even care what people say. And I've been trying other software for a long time, for some years, and ZBrush took a while to stick because of the interface, etc. It has a steep learning curve, whatever. But once it's stuck, there's no competition. It's like LeBron James versus me playing NBA. You know, I can still play basketball. I don't play on the NBA. You know what I mean? And nobody can change my mind on that. That's the only thing that I'm very, very stuck up in terms of opinions. It's like when it comes to sculpting features and remeshing features, let's say for sculpting, there's no contest. No contest. There's not a lot of competition though. Even though in box modeling there's more competition. You know, there's Cinema 4D, there's Maya, there's Blender, there's 3ds Max, there's Modo, there's whatever, you know. In terms of sculpting, there's like 3, 4, maybe if you count the mobile ones, you know, Forger from Maxon and what was the name of it? Nomad, I think. So if you count those, there's like 5, but there's not a lot of like there's for a regular DCC app, you know. There's Houdini, there's Jesus, man. Don't get me started on Houdini. Houdini is impressive. That's an impressive piece of software. But yeah. So it's whatever works for you, man. At the end of the day, all that matters is the result, right? The rest is just nitpicking. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap this up right here. We haven't gone through like usual. I mean, when I'm streaming, I always go a little bit slower. But I think you got the point, right, where we want to go with our trim sheets. So we're gonna do a little bit of a pattern there, maybe some patterns over here, like some stone patterns, and over there as well. And then we're gonna do some cool like displacement meshes in ZBrush just to complement this. Next week, I'm going to go over actual tileable textures like for grass, dirt, and some tileable textures for some steps, like some procedural, not procedural, but like we're going to speed things up when it comes to actually making the mesh for stairs and steps. And we're going to use a tileable texture in ZBrush and displace meshes in ZBrush. So that's going to be cool. I'm looking forward to it on next stream. And then if we have some time on the last stream before the summit, which is on the 23rd, I think. 23rd, yeah, that's the 23rd of September. On that one, we're going to start with the hero prop, which is the portal. I'm going to make like a huge portal going around the sword where it's cut into the stone, and the stone as well. I have even started preparing the actual rune thing. This rune is actually it came from an alpha. I got a pack of alphas from ArtStation, and then I did 2 mesh, and I did some cleanup stuff with ZModeler. There you go, ha. And it's a little cleaner now, and then we can use this as sort of like live boolean to cut into the rock and make the rune thing work. Or we could have used the alpha to just embed into the surface, and then we can even get an ID map out of it by masking changed points and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, starting off with this kind of shape here to make the maybe in the portal as well. I'm gonna have some runes around the portal. That's gonna be cool. I hope you guys enjoy that, and we're not gonna stick too much to this because I want to move on to other projects as well. I have in my mind, I have some ideas for future projects for this stream and my personal stream as well. I'm not going to be doing my personal stream until the ZBrush Summit because I think that only makes sense, right? Because I'm going to stick to ZBrush as long as I can for these streams before the Summit. I'm not going to compete in the Sculpt Off because I think that's only for online, for the online viewers and the online attendees. But I encourage you guys, especially if you're in my Discord server, to just participate in the Sculpt Off. I know Nightbot has been the Nightbot has been posting the Cineversity series for getting started with ZBrush and the Sculpt Off. So if you guys are new to ZBrush, just be sure to check out the Cineversity site has a lot of incredible getting started to ZBrush. I think this is what Anna Carolina, I think it is. Yeah, this is Anna Carolina's getting started with ZBrush. So this is a great series. I've watched it, I skimmed through it, and it's, if you guys are new to ZBrush, just be sure to check those out. Those are free on Cineversity. And enroll in the Sculpt-Off. There's cool prizes. Usually there's prizes even for people that just by participating. So you participate, you get immediately, you get it like a prize or something. I don't know what is this year's prize, but last year it was the XMD toolbox. So you got the XMD full lifetime membership toolbox for just participating. So that is cool. So yeah, guys, I hope you found this fairly enjoyable. I do. That's why I'm an environment artist. I like doing this stuff, like trim sheets and thinking, planning ahead of the environment and all of that. So I hope you guys found this useful and intriguing, and be sure to join my Discord server. I'm gonna plug that, make it another shameless plug here. Just copy this to the chat. And be sure to follow me on my socials as well. There's ArtStation, there's Instagram, and YouTube and Twitch. And if you guys want to stick around next week to see the completion of this and the tileable textures for the rest of the materials that we're going to make in Unreal and Substance and stuff like that, then this is the truest statement I've ever. Yeah, that's true. If you're an environment artist and you don't like trim sheets, then I'm sorry, you're not a true environment artist. That's like let's say a rite of passage. You have to push through that first. Trim sheets, they suck, whatever. You know, like, it's a very mechanical process, but it's like you have to like trim sheets, or at least tileable textures. You know, but trim sheet is a tileable texture, so. Right, guys, I have to wrap this up because here at home in Portugal, it's 10 p.m. So, and I haven't had dinner. So I should have did a little break, but I didn't because I enjoyed streaming and I enjoyed this trim sheet that I've been doing. Here's another testament of how much an environment artist I am. I didn't even take a break. So there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, I'll enjoy LA, definitely. If you guys come to the ZBrush Summit again, just text me on Discord or whatever on social media, and we'll catch up and I'll say hi. Nice stream, Rodolfo. Thank you so much. All right, guys, I gotta go. Cheers. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next